All the Young Dudes. Sirius's Perspective by Rollercoaster Words. Chapter 103. 6th Year, 12 Nights.
You've got a cute way of talking. You got the better of me. Just snap your fingers.
Monday, the 20th of December, 1976. Come on, now touch me, babe. Sirius belted at the top of his lungs, using a shampoo bottle as a microphone. Andromeda had sent him the Doors' Soft Parade album for his birthday, and he'd nearly perfected his American accent. He tapped the bouncing drum beat out on the tile, singing the trumpet's blaring notes. Ba-da, ba-da! He continued to hum the song as he stepped out of the shower, toweling off quickly and pulling on his clothes. When he exited the bathroom, Remus was leaning against his bedpost, with an exasperated sort of smile. Sirius smirked. No applause. No applause. Instead, Remus rolled his eyes, moving towards the door. Hurry up, I'm starving. They left the cosy privacy of Gryffindor Tower, braving the empty stone corridors to make their way downstairs for breakfast. They were early, thanks to Remus's demanding stomach, and when the two Ravenclaws arrived, they sat closer than they had at dinner. Isn't it ridiculous that they serve this much food when there are only 5 students? Asked the girl, who had a mass of frizzy hair clipped back from her freckly face. It seems so wasteful. Indeed, although there were only 4 students at the table, the Slytherin liked to sleep in, apparently, the plates had filled just as they would for a full-sized feast. Fried eggs, bacon, sausages, black pudding, baked beans, fried tomatoes, toast, cereal, porridge, a truly astonishing array of fresh juices. Nah, Sirius smirked, nodding meaningfully towards Remus. You've clearly never seen Moony here eat. Shut up, Remus said, words muffled around a mouthful of toast. The Ravenclaw watched in awe as Remus proceeded to eat enough food to feed a small family, and Sirius had to keep himself from laughing at their gobsmacked expressions. He was grinning and sipping his tea when the morning post arrived, owls swooping through the hall and dropping their wares haphazardly onto the table. 6 brightly coloured envelopes landed next to Sirius's mug, and a soft purple package was delivered to Remus. You're popular, the Ravenclaw boy commented, watching as Sirius shoved the envelopes out of the way. Don't encourage him, Remus said dryly, examining his own package. We're going out for ice skating before lunch, chirped the Ravenclaw girl, cheerfully tucking her letter of her own into a pocket of her robes. The lake's frozen over. Do you want to come? Sounds good, Sirius nodded, smiling, and stirred more sugar into his tea. When they stood up to return to the Gryffindor Tower, Remus collected his post from the table, flicking through the letters as they walked. Are all these Christmas cards? He asked, as the door to their room swung shut behind them. Oh, yeah, I think so, Sirius responded absent-mindedly, flinging open his wardrobe to search for his ice skates. He was sure he brought them along. Who are they from? Sirius shrugged. Whoever. He really couldn't be bothered to open them. After the first few, he'd realised they were all just along the same lines, and it was all pretty much just a load of twaddle. Besides, he had more important things to focus on. The skates had to be there. They must just be tucked into the very back corner. Sirius. What? He was halfway inside his wardrobe, kneeling on the floor outside and leaning in, so that he could reach all the way to the very back. These are all from girls. Aha! Sirius cried triumphantly, extracting himself from the wardrobe with his ice skates gripped by the laces in his fist. I knew I brought a pair during first year. Are you telling me your feet haven't grown since you were 11? They have a growing charm on them, Sirius said smugly, brushing away the dust that had collected after years of abandonment. They get bigger to fit me, only the best for the blacks. Clever. These cards, though. He turned and found Remus sitting in a heap of colourful paper with an odd look on his face. Oh, those? What do you open them for? You want to be careful. One of them squirted perfume at me. Perfume, Remus. He grimaced. Are all these girls you've... It took him a moment to figure out what Remus was asking. When he did, he grinned. Really, Moony, I'm flattered. As legendary as I'm sure my stamina is. No, they're just girls. They send me nonsense all the time. All the time? Remus was frowning. What was his problem? Oh, come on, what are you, jealous? Sirius teased. They're just cards. I suppose. Now let's get you some skates. I don't want any. I'll break my neck. Oh, you'll be fine. I'll show you how to do it. Remus turned back to the cards again, flipping through them. There must be 20 here altogether. What was he on about? Sirius felt a prickle of unease. Was it possible that Moony was jealous? Was there some bird he liked in that stack? Did he wish that he was getting Christmas cards too? He always kicked up such a fuss about avoiding the subject of girls, but maybe it was just because he was insecure. Look, Remus, why don't we find you a girlfriend? Then you won't be so interested in my love life. What? Remus yelped, whipping his head around in shock. Sirius stared back, wishing desperately that he could read Moony's mind. It was impossible to decipher his expression. Yeah, Sirius nodded, trying to be encouraging. I reckon that freckly Ravenclaw likes you. Oh, Marlene! Oh, what about Marlene? She's pretty nice. Likes you. All the girls he hung out with liked him. He was so bloody charming. She offered to snog me once, Remus said thoughtfully. It was a joke, though. Marlene's not interested in me. I don't need a girlfriend. Sirius ignored the little thrill that went through him at that. It doesn't mean anything, you dolt. He kept his voice light, teasing. Don't knock it till you've tried it. Right, let's see what we can do about these skates. It had been ages since he'd gone ice skating, but Sirius fell back into it easily, gliding across the lake and yelling, Look, Moony, watch this! Before twirling in faster and faster circles until he was dizzy and laughing. Remus smiled at him, wobbling precariously near the grass, cheeks pink with cold. It turned out that the Ravenclaw boy, Arnold, was pretty good at skating, and Sirius challenged him to a race across the ice. As he sped over the frozen lake, wind whipping in his hair, Sirius felt a thrill of nostalgic joy. He laughed, glancing to the side, and saw a dark flash of Arnold's hair, just like, race to the other side. Wait, Sirius, no fair! You have to say 1, 2, 3, then go! Hey! Sirius, it's not fair! Oh, come on, Reg, don't be such a baby. Here, I'll teach you how to spin. Sirius won the race. He and Arnold paused, panting, hands on their knees, and looked back towards the shore. Remus was there with the freckly Ravenclaw girl, his hands on her shoulders as she led him around in small circles. She kept glancing back at him, smiling. Sirius frowned. Hey, Arnold, race you back. Sirius stopped by the tower on the way for lunch, waving Remus ahead. Go on. I know what you're like when you're hungry. I don't fancy a stroll up to the tower and back with you acting like a grump. I've just got to put my skates away. I'll only take a minute. He hurried up the stairs, tossing his ice skates back into his wardrobe, and paused, looking down at the heap of cards still spread across his bed. He thought of Remus's face as he flipped through them, Remus's hands on the Ravenclaw girl's shoulders. You're being silly, Sirius told himself firmly. So what if he wants a girlfriend? He crumpled the cards up into the bottom of his trunk, all the same. By the time lunch was over, Sirius was feeling sleepy and slow, exhausted from a morning of vigorous skating, followed by running up and down the tower stairs. He yawned as Remus lit the fireplace in their room, watching him rifle around for another jumper. Still cold? Freezing. Remus yanked on a second pair of socks, huddling up in front of the fire. Should have moved around a bit more. Gets the blood pumping. Still, Sirius kept his voice casual, teasing. You had a nice chat with Freckles? Tina. She's interested in goblin finance. Excellent, you can marry rich. Remus attempted to nail him in the head with a slipper, which he dodged. Oi! Sirius released a startled laugh. I'm just trying to help you out a bit, Moony. You ought to have other interests outside of that bloody study group. I think, if anything, I'd be doing more studying if I started going out with Tina, which I'm not going to do. Remus turned back to the fire with a grumpy frown on his face. Sirius watched him, trying to stifle the smug twist of satisfaction that came with having Moony all to himself. It wasn't that he didn't want Remus to get a girlfriend. It was just, well, it was hard to imagine any girl that would be right for Moony. That was all. Besides, none of that mattered right now. Sirius brushed his thoughts away, the way that someone might swat at flies. Remus had turned to look at him, ridiculous in his thickest jumper and 2 pairs of socks, shivering. Sirius couldn't stop the devilish smile that twisted across his lips. The bed's warm. Tuesday, the 21st of December, 1976. Bloody Regulus. It was 2 days ago, get over it. He's such a prick. I know. Left a bit. I can't go any further left, there's no room. Careful, not there. Oops. Anyway, you should have let me hit him. You weren't going to hit him, you were going to break a knuckle. You can't punch. Yes, I can. No, you can't. Look, can you please concentrate? You keep missing. I've punched loads of people. Oops, sorry. You've play fought with James. It's not the same thing. Oh, and you know how to punch, do you, Mooney? Yeah, I do, actually. Aha! I win. That's not fair. Can't we get closer? No, that's cheating. Oh, fine. I forgot you were such a stickler for the rules. Prefect Lupin. Far be it from me to infringe upon the sacred regulations of this most hallowed game. What would the referee think? The audience? My adoring fans? The game in question was about 2 hours old. It had been a stroke of genius that involved cutting holes in James and Peter's bedsheets so that they could string them across the common room and fire various objects through the makeshift goals, quills, gobstones, or jars of broom polish. It was actually ingenious because, due to the nature of the game, they never had to tidy up. Once they'd finished shooting everything through from one side, they simply had to switch to the other and start over. Remus listened to him grumble with a smug smile as they moved over to the other side of the sheets, utterly unmoved by any of Sirius's excellent points about the fact that they had made up the rules and they had the power to change them. They positioned themselves in front of the fireplace. I wonder if this is what camping's like, Remus mused, glancing at the crackling fire. Never been, Sirius shrugged. James thought it was funny that my family never did it. Camping, according to his mother, was uncivilized. I always wanted to, Remus murmured, levitating a crystal ball out from under the couch. But I like the idea of anywhere that wasn't St. Edmund's. Sirius blinked. He didn't think Remus had ever voluntarily brought up St. Edmund's before. He always seemed to want to avoid talking about anything that had to do with his life outside of Hogwarts. Yeah, I don't blame you, he said, remembering the dreary grey building. Then, looking pointedly at the crystal ball, You're going to smash that. No, I'm not. I'm aiming at the big settee. Sure enough, Remus flicked his wand, and the crystal ball went zooming straight through the very smallest hole, where it landed with a quiet thump on the cushions. Remus smirked and raised a brow, and Sirius had to stifle a groan. It's scary how good at this you are. Get you on a broom and you'd make a bloody good chaser. No thanks. You'll go. Sirius levitated a gobstone, aiming for one of the larger holes. Did you ever play that Muggle game at St. Edmund's? He asked, off-handed, frowning as he fired with a bit too much force and sent the gobstone sailing over the top of the sheet. Foul, Remus said. What Muggle game? Blast. Sirius had thought he'd definitely learnt the name of it in Muggle studies, but for the moment his mind had gone completely blank. With all the running about and kicking. We saw them playing it when we were, over the summer. Oh, football? No, I never liked it. Had too many bruises already. Sirius flushed, wondering if he'd put his foot in it. Yeah, sorry, I didn't think, of course. He snuck a glance at Mooney, trying to gauge his reaction. Would he tense up, get angry? Would he snap at Sirius if he tried to keep talking about it? But Remus seemed calm, levitating quills and shooting them systematically through each hole they'd cut in the sheets. Sirius watched for a moment, curiosity and caution battling in his mind. But Mooney was so rarely willing to talk about himself, and he couldn't pass up the opportunity. Is it really awful, living there? He held his breath, waiting for Remus to answer. The tall boy stared ahead at the cut-up sheets, a series of inscrutable fleeting expressions flickering over his features, before he finally settled into something cautious and thoughtful. It's not awful, but it's noisy. You always have to watch your back, and no one ever really cares about you much. They have to make sure you don't die, or get arrested, or starve or whatever, but they don't actually care. He looked down at his hands, pulling a pack of cigarettes out of his back pocket and sticking one between his teeth. Sirius watched silently as he lit it with his wand, catching the box when Remus tossed them his way, fiddling with it as he swallowed. I know how that feels. He wished he could get rid of the ache in his chest, which only grew as he watched Remus breathe out smoke. When Mooney turned to look at him, he grinned. Look what I can do. Sirius placed the cigarette in his mouth, frowning in concentration. He'd been practicing the spell for weeks, and it wasn't effortless just yet. After a moment, though, he felt the buzz of magic at his fingertips, and when he snapped his fingers, the cigarette burnt orange. He almost let it drop from his mouth, which split into a wide smile as he turned back to Remus. Blimey, the other boy smiled dryly, raising an eyebrow. Clever you. Wednesday, the 22nd of December, 1976. What if we used a rope? A rope. Or a harness or something. Where on earth would we find a harness? I don't know. James scratched his chin, his face in the reflection pressed up close to the mirror. Reckon there's got to be something lying around in that broom closet somewhere that we could use. Sirius snorted, thinking to himself that he had become very familiar with quite a few of Hogwarts' broom closets, and not once had he stumbled across a rope. Of course, he wasn't usually looking very hard. He was typically preoccupied with other activities. Well, whatever, James continued. We just need something to tie each pair together. So long as it was sturdy enough, I don't imagine it would matter exactly what we used. Sirius made an assenting noise, nodding. He had told James about his ice skating on the frozen lake, and his friend was now trying to figure out a way they could combine skating with broomsticks, by having one person fly and drag the other one behind. All right, try to contain your enthusiasm. Sirius laughed. Oh, calm down, Potter. We can try it when you get back. Mooney's already begged off for any more ice skating for the duration of the holiday. Deal, James grinned, then paused, hesitating before asking, how are things with Mooney? What? Good, fine. Why? What makes you ask? Oh, no reason, just, with everything last summer, you know. Of course, Sirius thought, kicking himself mentally. Oh, no, yeah, things are, they're good. Back to, normal. He cleared his throat. Good, James smiled. Where is he? Can I say hello? Oh, he's upstairs, sleeping. It's 8 o'clock. Sirius shrugged, trying not to blush as he remembered how he had been curled up in Remus's bed just a few hours before, while Mooney kissed his neck, long fingers skimming gently over his chest, lower and lower. He cleared his throat again. How is your, family thing? Good, James said, smile fading a bit. Yeah, nice. I don't see much of my cousins, and it's been ages since my mum saw her sister, so yeah, it was good. A small furrow had appeared between his brows as he talked. Sirius raised an eyebrow. And? He prompted, recognising the stifled dismay in his friend's features. James sighed. And I think they're leaving the country. Sirius blinked. Oh. Yeah, I don't think, I know. They told us that they were leaving, moving away. Where? James shrugged weakly. America, maybe? Canada, maybe France. I don't know if they were properly certain, or if they just didn't want to tell Mum. I think she knew too, and it's not like she doesn't get it. It's just, well, it was rough after they left. Sirius nodded solemnly. Is it the war? James said. Yeah. They've had a few fights about it, you know. My uncle thinks my mum and dad are being selfish. His expression was stormy as he said it, and Sirius frowned along with him. Selfish? Yeah, I overheard him once, laying it into Dad, saying that his involvement, or whatever, could put the whole family at risk. As if the whole wizarding world won't be at risk if we don't bloody win this stupid... He broke off, agitated, running a hand through his hair. Anyway, I think tonight was supposed to be like reconciliation, but it just felt really final. Like they were saying goodbye. I'm sorry, mate, Sirius said quietly into the mirror. His friend gave him a shaky smile. Yeah, he said. Me too. Thursday, the 23rd of December, 1976. Show me how to throw a punch, then. Remus glanced up from the book he was reading. Seriously? Deadly serious. He grinned impishly, wiggling his eyebrows, and Remus made a disgusted noise at the overused pun. Oh, go on, Sirius nudged his leg with his outstretched foot. Show me. Teach me something, Professor Lupin. The sheets were still up in the common room, though the house elves had tidied away all the scattered items that the boys had been using as projectiles. The stretched cloth muted the winter sunlight, which streamed through the cut-out holes, and cast 5 bright circles on the carpet. The 2 boys had both been reclining, Remus reading on the couch, and Sirius sprawled on his belly in front of the fireplace, flicking little bits of paper into the flame. Okay, but you need something to hit that you won't hurt yourself on. They tested a few sofa cushions before Remus had the idea to cast a softening charm on an empty patch of wall. Sirius waited, buzzing with anticipation for Moony to tell him what to do. Make a fist. He made a fist. No, okay, not like that. Yeah, put your thumb over there. Unless you want it broken. He moved his thumb. Okay. Now you want it at shoulder level, yeah? Then, Sirius waited, holding his fist at his shoulder. After a moment, Remus sighed. Here, just let me... He nudged Sirius out of the way and began to demonstrate, rolling up the sleeves of his jumper and reeling back his arm. The muscles in his shoulders tensed and released under his shirt. Sirius watched, very, very carefully, so that he could copy the movements, of course. After a moment of demonstration, Remus guided him back in front of the wall, grabbing his arm and moving it into position. Sirius watched, mouth dry, as Moony's fingers wrapped around his fist, dragging his hands up. Legs apart. Don't lean forward too much, okay? Try it now. It took 20 minutes before Remus was satisfied, finally declaring that Sirius might be able to give someone a black eye. It was grudging praise, but Sirius grinned nonetheless, panting with the exertion. Where'd you learn this? St. Edmund's. Oh, yeah. Sirius remembered Remus when he'd first arrived at Hogwarts, scrawny and belligerent and ready for a fight. They'd never really considered before the reasons why Remus might be so truculent. He thought again of the split-knuckled anger that he had smelled on that scrubby lawn. No, not like that, Remus said hurriedly. Some of the older boys taught me a few summers ago. They were all a bit rough, liked to fight, but they were nice to me. Ah, Sirius relaxed a bit, smiling. A thought occurred to him. Was this the year you began your foray into organised crime? My what? Oh, yeah, the fags. Yep, that summer. I'll never forget you stomping onto the train in those boots. Oh, don't. Remus buried his face into his hands, groaning. I was so obnoxious. Sirius thought about the way Moony had barreled into the train car, like a summer storm. All the thunder and static, electricity. He thought about the way his throat had gone dry, his palms sweaty, how his heart had pounded in his chest. Huh. I don't think so. Sirius rubbed his sore knuckles absent-mindedly. Anyway, you had a good reason. He pulled his mind away from the memory of watching Remus smoke for the first time, asking, Did you, ever learn any more about Greyback? Remus blinked, and a familiar curtain fell behind his eyes. Yeah, he moved away, sitting down and picked up a newspaper. Bits and pieces. Moony, I know you hate talking about him. You can tell me to stop. No, it's fine. Remus was staring down at the paper in his lap. You don't think the attacks over the last few months... Now Remus looked up, searching his face. Sirius didn't know what it was he'd found there, but it seemed to be enough to continue. Yeah, he nodded once. It was him. Moody told me. Sirius felt cold. Shit. Yeah, shit. You don't think he'd come after you? Sirius thought of the disappearance over the summer, the panicked frenzy of it, the way Mrs. Potter had nearly cried in relief when she'd wrapped Remus up in her arms. Well, I don't see why you would. The other boy shrugged, looking back down at the newspaper, fingers tracing absent-mindedly over an old wound on his side. Sirius had memorised that scar with his fingertips, had traced the jagged line of every tooth. It's not like he can do anything else to me now. The worst has already happened. Moony. He didn't even know what else to say. He didn't know what else to do with the swell of emotion that filled his lungs, that caught in his breath. I wish no one had ever hurt you, Sirius thought, without meaning to. I wish I could hide you, or take you away. He swallowed, looking back down at his knuckles. What the hell am I thinking? Friday, the 24th of December, 1976. Do we have any weed? Sirius asked, as they made their way up the stairs to the Gryffindor Tower. They'd just come from breakfast, where he'd had to politely manoeuvre out of another chess tournament with the Ravenclaws. After spending the previous morning with them, Sirius had had quite enough. "When you say we," Remus asked, raising an eyebrow, "did you mean me?" "Fine. Do you have any weed?" "No." "But you know where some is?" "Maybe." "That's my little delinquent. Come on then, show me." Remus eyed him, reluctantly. "We'd have to go outside, to the greenhouses, and probably smoke there too. I don't want the house elves getting a whiff. It's too cold, I'd rather not." "Oh, come on, Moony. You haven't been outside in ages." "I know, it was deliberate." "Come on," Sirius laughed, tugging on his sleeve, and Remus acquiesced with a long, suffering sigh. There was a crunchy, day-old sheet of snow on the ground, turned half to ice, and they slipped and slid their way down to the greenhouses. Sirius watched as Remus kicked away a patch of snow, sniffing for a moment before unearthing a tin box full of lovely, pungent little buds wrapped neatly in brown paper. They snagged a few, then looked around for a place to smoke. Remus was right, it was far too cold outside. "We could go in there," Sirius suggested, nodding to the steamy greenhouses. "Are you mental? Sprout comes out here twice a day to check on the mandrakes. It has to be somewhere else." "The shack?" "Oh, fuck that," Remus snarled. Sirius started in shock, and Moony's features softened, guilty and embarrassed as he muttered, "I ate it there. Please, somewhere else." "Okay, sorry. Oh, I know." He reached out for Remus's wrist, pulling him along back towards the castle. Sirius didn't have to say where they were going for Remus to catch on. Moony knew Hogwarts better than any of them. The Marauders' map had been his brainchild, and they had almost reached the statue of the one-eyed humpback witch when the seventh-year Slytherin rounded the corner. They froze abruptly. Sirius dropped Moony's hand. "What are you two doing?" the older boy asked, eyeing their guilty expressions. "Just going for a stroll?" Sirius tilted his chin up. "It's a free castle." "Whatever." The Slytherin boy rolled his eyes, apathetic, and swept past them, robes twisting as he disappeared down the hallway. Once he was gone, Remus pulled the map out of his pocket and unfolded it, squinting down at the little moving dot. Sirius peered over his shoulder. Percival's Flint. "Blech," he grimaced. "I think he's a relative." Inside the tunnel, they used their cloaks as cushions, setting down on the packed dirt floor and casting a quick illumination spell. "Should have bought the record player." Sirius leaned back on his hands. "We could get quite comfy here. Don't know why I never thought of it before." "You and your cave-dwelling fantasies." Remus shook his head fondly, careful and precise as he rolled a joint. "We are not spending the rest of Christmas here." Sirius grinned, but didn't argue. He figured he could always try to change Moony's mind later. As it was, they still ended up whirling away the rest of the morning in the tunnel, passing Remus's immaculately rolled joint back and forth, sharing small smiles as their fingers brushed. Sirius felt giggly and stupid and somewhat floaty as they made their way back up to the great hall for lunch, where they scoffed the food the house elves had prepared, like they were starving. After lunch, the Ravenclaws pressed them for one more game of chess, and Sirius, still feeling the effects of the last joint, and quite sure that his mind had expanded to twice its usual size, allowing him to discover the universe's hidden secrets when it came to chess strategies, found himself agreeing, determined to beat Tina, and utterly confident in his ability to succeed. He did not succeed. It was through no fault of his own that he lost. Moony had rudely fallen asleep at the table, and his soft, murmuring snores were quite distracting, as was the way his lips twitched while he slept. It was impossible for Sirius to focus on the implementation of his groundbreaking new chess strategy, which he kept forgetting. It definitely had something to do with the rooks, or maybe the knights. Eventually, he was forced to admit defeat. Tina smiled bashfully, but did not look all too surprised when she had won. Sirius turned to his sleeping friend, nudging the other boy's shoulder. "You're snoring, Moony." Remus blinked himself awake, head still pillowed by his hands on the table. "Are you all right?" Tina frowned, peering at him through her large cat-eye glasses. Oh, yeah." He sat up, rolling his shoulders a bit. "Sorry, must not have slept enough last night." "You look quite pale," the Ravenclaw girl murmured, scanning him clinically. "Perhaps you ought to go back to bed for a bit. Sirius said you were busy all morning with herbology, so I'm not surprised you're tired." Sirius couldn't help himself. He began to giggle, covering his mouth with his hand to try and stifle it. Remus elbowed him in the ribs, which only caused more laughter to bubble up in his throat. "Yeah, I will go for a lie down. Cheers." The tall boy stood up, stretching his gangly limbs, and Sirius tried not to stare when the planes of his back moved under his jumper. As Remus walked away, Sirius swallowed. He had suddenly lost all interest in chess. Still, he played another round with Tina, buggering it up completely, so that he had his king in check after 15 minutes before bidding her farewell and hurrying off to Gryffindor Tower. "Moony?" "I'm in the bath." Sirius cracked the door open, and Remus huffed as he entered. "Didn't say you could come in." "Nothing I haven't seen," he smirked, leaning against the sink. Remus had brought his arithmancy textbook into the bath with him. Sirius felt an absurd surge of fondness. "James gave me the password to the prefect baths, if you'd rather go there." "I'm fine here, thanks." "Okay. I've had an idea." "Does it involve smoking weed in a tunnel?" "Yes." "Brilliant." "Not just that, though. I fancy an outing." "Do you?" Remus closed his eyes, sarcastic smile playing on his lips as he leaned back. "How does the hogshead sound?" Remus opened his eyes, still smiling. "It sounds completely mad." "Excellent," Sirius grinned back. "We'll go after dinner then." Remus protested, of course, but Sirius could tell that he wasn't really trying to change his mind. "I'm not allowed to go to Hogsmeade." "Moony, it's Christmas Eve." That seemed to do the trick. After a few hours, they stood under the Honeyduke's trapdoor, smoking another one of Remus's expertly rolled joints. He could give Avini a run for her money, Sirius thought. They giggled and shushed each other as they snuck chocolate frogs into their pockets as they crept through the shop, and then they were outside, in the bracing winter wind and the twinkling Christmas lights. The 3 broomsticks wasn't an option. Rose Murta had a soft spot for the marauders, but Sirius was still pretty sure that she'd turn them into McGonagall if she saw them. So they made their way to the Hogshead, where a gruff barman didn't seem all too fussed what they got up to, as long as they paid. And pay they did. Before they knew it, they had polished off an entire bottle of fire whiskey, leaving them wonderfully drunk and grinning like idiots at each other from across their small corner table. "I haven't had a drink since Halloween," Remus said, after setting down his glass. "Oh, I was so sick that night." Sirius shook his head, smiling. "I didn't even remember half of it." "I do," Remus said curtly, shoulders tense, voice clipped. Sirius felt a sick twist of guilt as he realised what Moony must be thinking. "Of course I remember that part, Remus." He stared down at his goblet, feeling self-conscious and slightly unsteady on his stool. After a moment, Remus said, "First time I got pissed was that summer. I got the boots and all that gear. Got so off my head that I thought I was going to die." "I got tipsy at a family banquet when I was 13, Sirius said, gesturing to the bartender for more drinks. "But not as drunk as I got for your birthday that year. Still, it was all the same to Mother. And out came the wand." He waved his hand, reciting the familiar slashing motion that he had watched her make so many times, imitating her ice-chip voice. "The black air shows proper comportment at all times." Slash, slash. Across the table, Remus winced, and Sirius suddenly realised what he was doing. He stopped abruptly, mumbling, "Sorry," folding his arms as their drinks were delivered. "It's not funny. I don't know why I act like this." "Well, you're out now," Remus said earnestly. "You don't ever have to go back." "Just go away," Sirius thought. "Don't ever come back." "Yeah," he slurred, wishing he could shake his brother's echoing voice from his ears. "It's all Reggie's mess now. Nasty little so-and-so. Do you know how many times I took the blame for him? How many times I stood between—" Sirius thought of Reg, curled up next to him in bed. Reg, who was terrified of ghouls. Reg, who crouched in puddles after it rained and moved worms back to the grass. He used to be a proper little crybaby, but Mother hates crying. She said it makes men sissies, makes them nasty, filthy queers. Well, whatever, some bollocks. But anyway, Reg would cry, and I would do something worse to distract her. And then she'd do the thing. Slash, slash. He didn't know why he was thinking about it. He didn't know why the words were spilling out of him now, here. He'd never even told James about what had happened last spring with his brother. You know, if either of us had just learnt not to get upset, then maybe. But I suppose Reg learnt, in the end. Cold-hearted fucker. He gulped his drink, just to stop himself talking. Sorry, I shouldn't moan, especially not to you. You know all about my bloody lack of self-control. Sirius watched him from across the table, eyes dark. After a moment, he mumbled, It's fine. Probably a good thing, anyway. I hardly ever cry. I think I lost the ability at some point. Maybe I'm like Reg. You are not like Reg, Sirius said, fervently, reaching out under the table, without thinking to squeeze Mooney's knee. The other boy smiled at him, in a way that made his heart twist. And he quickly withdrew, glancing around, feeling acutely visible. Can you smell that? Remus asked, stretching languidly in a way that made Sirius feel dizzy. Or maybe that was just the fire whiskey. Stale beer? B.O.? He laughed lightly, looking down at his cup. No, it's something... It's an animal or something. Sorry, mate. He finished the last of his drink. I could turn into a dog and we could have a sniff, but I think I'm too drunk to remember how to turn back. They left for Hogwarts soon after, swaying slightly as they meandered back through the dark cobble streets. Remus was drunk, perhaps even more so than Sirius, because for once he initiated, tugging them back into an alley, crowding Sirius against a wall and kissing him hard enough to bruise, pressing their hips together, sliding his thigh between his legs, and, Hey! Sirius pushed him away, whispering breathlessly. Not here. Someone will see. It was a dizzy rush back to Honeydukes, stumbling over their own feet, tugging at each other's sleeves, and Remus's hands were on him as soon as they were through the door to the cellar. Sirius had to drag him down, away from the scattered boxes of sweets, into the tunnel. It was so dark, nothing but body heat, mouths fever-hot as they found each other. The drinking had blurred their edges, left them both loose-limbed and eager, until Sirius felt like he was melting under Remus's touch, boneless and panting against the rough tunnel wall. And then Mooney was pulling away, hands sliding down his sides, firm on his hips, holding him in place as if he would ever try to run away. What are you... Oh! His head fell back against the wall, fingers twisting automatically into the downy curls of Mooney's hair, legs trembling. If it weren't for the alcohol, the sounds that he was making might have embarrassed him. But they were alone, in the dark, and he couldn't have stopped himself if he tried. It's good, he was thinking, so good, and don't stop, and I wish he wanted me like this all the time. And then he wasn't thinking anything at all, lost completely to the obliterating heat. Christmas Day, 1976. Sirius woke up the next morning, feeling like something a troll had chewed up, swallowed, and shat out. Tell me there's a cure, Mooney, he moaned, shoving his head into his pillow. You're the one taking healing lessons. You're the one taking potions, Remus shot back grumpily. Pain is a potion thing. I do cuts and abrasions. Useless! Shut up. Sirius squeezed his eyes shut in a futile attempt to dull the pounding of his head, listening to the unmistakable sound of Remus stumbling to his feet and shuffling towards the bathroom, muttering, Cold shower, then breakfast. Fried eggs, trust me. Sirius's stomach twisted at the mention of food, but he followed Remus down to the great hall anyway, hair a tangled snarl around his face. Dumbledore smiled cheerfully as they took their seats at the table, booming, Happy Christmas, one and all. Both Sirius and Remus winced, the volume physically assaulting against their sensitive ears. Surprisingly, Mooney was right about the fried eggs, and Sirius felt significantly better once his stomach had been settled with some food. They opened their presents upon return to the common room, chucking all the wrapping paper into a pile in the corner as they stifled through sweets, clothes, books, and music. 2 new albums from Andromeda, much to Sirius's delight. They had just finished sorting through their gifts when James's familiar voice wavered from the compact mirror, and Remus, crowded in next to Sirius's shoulder so that they could both wish their friend a Merry Christmas. "You two okay?" James peered at them, frowning. "You look a bit peaky." "Hungover," Sirius explained. "Jealous," James grinned. "Weirdo," Remus said. Afterwards, they moved up to the bedroom, where Sirius put on one of the new records from Andromeda, Hotel California, by the Eagles.
As she stood in the doorway, I heard the mission bell. And I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven, and this could be hell.
They lay down on their beds, record player spinning in the middle of their room, listening to the slow swell of mournful guitar. After a few minutes, Sirius turned to look at Remus and noticed that he had dozed off. He propped himself up on his elbow, watching the slow rise and fall of Mooney's chest, the shadow that fell under the line of his jaw, the speckled sunlight over his throat. The next song on the album had started, slower and softer, but it was still with that reedy, doleful voice.
Many things you should have told her, but night after night your will.
Sirius rolled over, staring up at the ceiling. "I can't do this," he thought miserably. "I really don't think I can do this." Boxing Day, 1976. Why is it called Boxing Day, anyway? "Nobody knows," Remus said, yawning as he spooned sugar into his porridge. "It's one of life's great mysteries. Maybe I'll ask my Muggle Studies professor." "You do Muggle Studies," said Perfius Flint, shooting him an incredulous look from down the table. Sirius gave him a two-fingered salute, then pointedly turned his back. His knee bumped into Mooney's under the table, and he smiled as he reached out for the honey. Suddenly, owls came bursting into the hall with the Morning Post, screeching urgently. Sirius watched as they landed on the table, feathers ruffled. There were more than usual. Tina, sitting across from them, received her post, and they watched as she ripped open a letter. "It's from Mum!" Her eyes went wide behind the thick lenses of her glasses, and she stood abruptly, rushing out of the hall. Sirius watched, baffled, as Flint followed suit. Then Arnold. "What's going on?" Remus murmured, brow furrowed as he watched the other students leave. Professor Flitwick shook his head, sighing as he passed over a copy of the Daily Prophet. They leaned forward, eyes skinning rapidly across the paper. "Muggles attacked in Christmas crisis," announced the headline in bold letters. "Last night, while thousands slept safely in their beds on Christmas night, over 100 Muggles all over Britain were attacked in their homes. The Aura's office has confirmed this morning that the attacks were magical in nature and intended to cause harm. The attacks took place in a number of locations, apparently targeting families with ties to the wizarding world, those with magical relatives or history of Muggle magical relations. Offences range from minor jinxes to, in some cases, the use of unforgivable curses. There are no subjects at present. The Minister of Magic is expected to make a statement later today." They had just finished reading when Professor McGonagall swept into the hall, with Flint, Tina, and Arnold followed closely behind her. Tina's eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying, and even Flint's pathetic boredom had been marred with his miserable scowl. "You've all heard the news," McGonagall said, face drawn, eyes tired. "If your parents have requested you return home, then I will make arrangements at once to ensure you arrive safely." "Is there anything we can do, Professor?" Sirius asked, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he stood. "No, Mr. Black, thank you. Simply stay calm and carry on as normal." "Please, Professor Flitwick." Tina began to cry again. "I need to go home now. It's my auntie." Arnold murmured soothingly, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "Come on, Mooney," Sirius muttered. "Let's see if James knows anything." "I don't know anything," James cried, running an agitated hand through his hair as in the reflection of the mirror. "Dad's gone to the ministry with Moody. They'll let me read the paper. But there's nothing else. Everyone knows who did it, though. Death Eaters." Sirius nodded, thinking stickily of the dark tattoo on his cousin's forearm, the twisting snake. He wondered, vaguely, if she had been the one with the minor jinx incident. Somehow he doubted it. "Voldemort," Remus frowned. "Does he have that many followers? Over 100, the paper said, all over the country in one night." "Must have been more than anyone thought," James said grimly. Well, Sirius's lips twisted. My family alone could account for at least 20. They're not your family, James said, eyes flashing as he stared fervently out from the mirror. Sirius felt a familiar twist of anger in his chest. Of course it was easy for James to dismiss them. They had no clue what it was like being caged by your own blood, by your own last name. If Reg is one of them, I'll... Black, James said sharply. No one knows who any of them are. Calm down, okay? Mooney, you there? Yeah, Remus rumbled, shuffling back over so that James could see him. Don't let him be a twat about this, all right? Remus stared back at him, perplexed. It might have been amusing if it wasn't so bloody irritating to hear his friends talking about him like he wasn't right there. What do you want me to do? Just distract him. Sirius thought about throwing the mirror across the room, smashing it just to feel something break. Monday the 27th of December, 1976. He couldn't stop thinking about Reg, about Regulus, the bruised look of his eyes, the cold, sneering laugh. There have been reports of tests for those wizards seeking to join Voldemort. Sirius wished desperately that he could erase the words from his head, that he could dispel the squirming, burrowing thoughts, the simple connections that he felt impossible to ignore. Reg wouldn't do that, he told himself furiously. He isn't that kind of person. But then he would think about the tattoo on Bellatrix's arm, the frenzied look in his mother's eyes, the way she had hissed, "Swear it, Sirius," the desperate way Reg leaned towards their parents when they fussed over him, like a flower seeking the sun. He'd think about his brother's face, cold and foreign in the doorway of that strange room, as he spat, "It makes me sick to look at you." He'd think about scars and bandages and porcelain pawns. "Want to play that game?" Remus asked, after they spent the morning sitting in silence, staring at the fire and watching it burn the logs to ash. "Nah, I'm rubbish at it." "Yeah, but I'm not." "You play it, then." He could see what Remus was trying to do, and he wasn't in the mood. "Want to go out on your broom? I'll go with you and everything." "Don't have my broom here." "We can borrow one from the shed. Ooch won't mind." "Nah, I don't like using other people's brooms." "Snob." Would he have gone willingly? Would he have volunteered? Would he have been eager, desperate to impress his family? Their vile, loathsome, poisonous family. Chess? Boring. Homework? Sirius glared, slumping down further into his chair. "Want a blowjob?" "Bloody hell, Mooney!" "What? I'm running out of options here." "Jesus. I was just trying to cheer you up." "I don't want to be cheered up." "Yeah, that much is clear," Remus huffed, playing with the loose thread on his sleeve of his jumper. After a moment he asked, "Do you want to go to the Potters?" Sirius blinked. "What?" "I don't mind," Remus said quietly. "If you need to see them. If you need James." Sirius swallowed, thinking about it. Part of him did want to go, to feel the safety, the warmth of being surrounded by the Potters, to pretend, for a bit, that they were his own family, to forget his last name. But then his eyes caught on Remus's fingers, still fiddling with that thread, and he couldn't leave. He just couldn't. "Nah, what sort of mate would I be if I left you here all by yourself?" Mooney's mouth twisted into a frown, and he snapped the thread, fingers twitching to some repressed emotion. "Well, you're not being much of a mate right now, to be honest. I know you're in a mood, but..." Anger hissed in Sirius's chest, baring its teeth. "I'm not in a mood," he retorted hotly. "I'm pissed off. Look, you don't know what it's like, having a family out there doing Merlin knows what. People I'm actually related to, Mooney." "Oh God, change the bloody record, will you?" Mooney stood abruptly, pacing towards the fire and prodding at it with a bit more force than necessary. "Poor Sirius Black, the spoilt rich boy with a wicked family." Sirius felt an ugly twist of rage at the vitriol in his friend's voice. Where was this coming from? "Oi! Watch it." "Well, I'm sorry, but you've had 6 years of this now." "No, I don't know what it's like, because I don't have a family, let alone an evil one. You know what I've got? A pack of bloody werewolves, waiting for me to come of age so that I can finally join them and all the other monsters." Sirius stared, taken aback. Mooney? I've got some brutal fucking mass murderer child killer out there waiting for me, and not much else, to be honest. I don't have the Potters, or an uncle. I don't have a flippin' future. So, if you don't mind, I'd rather not sit around here listening to you whinge about how hard your life is. Sirius opened his mouth to reply, but Remus was already stomping off, slamming through the portrait hole with such force that the fat lady huffed indignantly. Well, I never! Sirius watched, mute, as the portrait slowly swung back into place. He'd never realised that Mooney was keeping all that bottled up. It was like one of those infuriating walls that he was always restricted behind, had come down, crumbling without warning, heavy stone crashing down around them. I've got some brutal fucking mass murdering child killer out there waiting for me. Sirius released a breath, staring blankly into the fire. Was Remus talking about Greyback? But he'd made it seem like he was safe, like there was nothing to worry about. It's not like he can do anything else to me now. Except, clearly that had been a lie. Clearly there was quite a lot to worry about, and clearly Mooney had been worrying about it all in secret, as usual. Sirius tugged his fingers through his hair, frustrated and ashamed, and so angry and desperately unfair it all was. He knew where Remus would be. It wasn't hard to figure out. It was the only place in the castle, really, where Sirius knew he would go. But it was hard to walk down the hall, hard to approach the wide doors, hard to stand at the threshold and look in at the tall, dark shelves. They towered, closing in, and Sirius had to force himself to take a ragged breath. Just go in, he told his legs furiously. Just keep walking. Just go to him. But he couldn't. Remus? It took some effort to keep his voice steady. Remus was sitting at one of the tables near the entrance, just a few feet away. Just a few steps and Sirius would be at his side. It should have been easy. It should have been the easiest thing in the fucking world. Sorry, I shouted, Padfoot. Sirius shrugged, shoving his hands into his pockets. His fingers were trembling. Sorry I was whining. Well, it's all right to be angry sometimes. It's normal. Remus set his book down, and Sirius felt a crushing wave of relief as he stood and walked over to the entrance, closing the distance between them. I was a dickhead, though. I shouldn't have said those things. They were true. I'm a spoilt rich brat. Yeah, Remus reached out, ruffling his hair, and Sirius wanted to lean into the touch. I don't mind, though. We can do one of those things you wanted to do now, if you still want. Come back to the common room, he thought, heart-pounding. Come back with me. Which one? Chess? And despite himself, despite the lingering nausea in his gut, despite the cold chill of anxiety running down his spine, Sirius felt something unwind in his chest as he looked up at that mischievous glint in Mooney's eye. Oh yeah, he said, a bit breathier than was strictly necessary. Definitely chess. Tuesday, the 28th of December, 1976. Do you want to talk about it? Sirius asked the next afternoon. He'd been thinking about it all day, trying to work up the courage to say the words. It was hard to know what was okay sometimes with Mooney, and what wasn't, what crossed those invisible boundaries that Sirius always seemed to find himself running into. Remus glanced up from the herbology textbook he had open on his lap, which he'd been squinting at for the past 30 minutes, as Sirius resigned himself to a game of solitaire. Do you want to talk about it? He repeated, staring down at his cards. The Greyback stuff. Oh, that. Remus hesitated for a moment, then said, No, I don't think so. If you're sure, Sirius spoke slowly, unsure of whether it was something he should push, but he couldn't resist nudging, just a little. Because you said you didn't know if he was after you, but then yesterday you said, Yeah, I know. Remus said quickly. I don't want to think about it right now, okay? Take what you can get, Sirius reminded himself. Don't push it. He glanced up from his game, smiling. Okay then. Wednesday, the 29th of December, 1976. Foul! Remus shouted, pumping his fists in the air. Sirius didn't think he'd ever seen his friend so enthusiastic about anything, even closely resembling a sport. It was quite a change from the resigned disinterest with which he held Quidditch. Balls, he sighed, eyeing Peter's trainers, which had just sailed clear over the goal line. I knew that was a bit ambitious. We should leave this up. Remus stretched to adjust the bedsheets where they hung from the ceiling. Imagine playing this with more people. Evans would make us take it down. Only after she'd had a go, I bet. He smiled to himself as he said it, eyes bright. Sirius watched him. You like her, don't you? It would explain why Moony was always so iffy about dating, ever the martyr. He probably wouldn't look at Lily if she threw herself naked at his feet, so long as he knew that James fancied her. And they spent so much time together. Remus frowned at him. Not this again. What? Sirius plastered on a smirk, looking away from Moony to focus on levitating an apple from the fruit bowl the house elves had left them. You're obsessed with finding me a girlfriend. I'm not. I don't want you to miss out on all that stuff. I don't want to make you miss out on any of that stuff. He managed to send the apple sailing through the largest hole and let out a victory cry. Yes! 5 points, Remus said, raising an eyebrow. You're still 20 down. He glanced away, clearing his throat. I'm not missing out on anything. I know you don't think you are, Moony, but I'm just saying, well, don't. Don't be angry with me. I'm not. The inkwell that Remus fired at the sheets flew with such force that it splattered bright blue stains across the white cloth. You seem pretty angry, Sirius said quietly, lowering his wand. He turned to Remus, stomach sinking, when the other boy wouldn't look at him. I knew this would happen. I don't want a girlfriend. How many times? I know you say that, but I can't help but think there must be a reason behind it. I think I know why. Sirius didn't want to say it, but he knew he had to. If he didn't try, if Remus kept tangled up in whatever this was, this thing between them, and it was the other boy who ended up resenting him. It's because of the werewolf thing, isn't it? Remus snapped his head around to stare at him, shocked. He blinked, then sat down abruptly, burying his face in his hands. Sirius felt as though there was a stone in his stomach. I knew it. It made so much sense. Remus and his infuriatingly martyr complex, calling himself a monster, acting like he was dangerous, like he was some sort of dark creature. Sirius hadn't understood it before, but after Moony's outburst it was so clear. The reason he hated talking about all that girl stuff, the reason he'd never dated, the reason he insisted that he didn't want a girlfriend, the reason he'd settled for this, the reason he gave in so easily every time Sirius threw himself at him. You're worried about a girl finding out, right? Sirius swallowed the lump in his throat. But, Evans knows, and she's fine about it. So I don't see why you wouldn't find someone else. And your scars aren't even as bad as you think they are. Oh, really? Remus's voice was sarcastic, disbelieving. Yeah, Sirius said earnestly. They're beautiful. No. Cool. And you're quite good looking. You're tall, and you're, Fuck, what was he saying? This wasn't the plan. This wasn't the plan at all. Remus looked up at him, in confusion, and Sirius could do nothing but stare back, helplessly. Thursday, the 30th of December, 1976. How far do you reckon Pete and Desdemona have gone? Sirius lay on his side, staring at Remus's bed in the dark. Ugh, why are you thinking about that? I don't know. He rolled back over. Can't sleep. He stared up at the canopy, arms behind his head, and listened to the soft sounds of Remus shifting in his sheets. Not tired? Sirius sighed. Suppose not. I keep thinking about tomorrow. Tomorrow? Last day of the year. Yep. Remus's voice was tired, warm and undeniably soft. Making resolutions? He yawned. Not really. Just the usual stuff. Stuff I should stop doing. It was a long list. At the top, currently, was stop imagining how it would feel to crawl into Moony's bed, to kiss his neck while he yawned, to curl up into his side and fall asleep. Well, Remus yawned again. Torture. He was so unguarded when he was sleepy, languid and mellow and deliciously pliant. Why don't you think about the stuff that you want to do? Bugger. Mooney wasn't a legitimate, was he? Like what? Oh, I don't know. He paused to stifle another yawn. Like how you're always talking about going to London. Muggle London. Properly, I mean. Not just a dodgy squat in Mile End. Oh, yeah, Sirius said enthusiastically, relieved. We should do that. Over the summer. Can we go to Carnaby Street? I don't see why not. I want to learn to play the guitar. Of course you do. And go camping. And see Bowie in concert. He kept talking, saying anything and everything that popped into his mind. Soon Remus's breathing evened out into slow, deep breaths, and Sirius knew he'd dropped off to sleep. He rolled back onto his side, staring at the shadowy outline under the covers. After a few minutes, when he was sure that Remus was truly, deeply unconscious, he whispered so quietly that he could barely hear his own voice. I want you to kiss me. Friday, the 31st of December, 1976. Do you know any sewing spells? Remus asked, from an armchair somewhere above Sirius's head. Why would I know any sewing spells? Sirius frowned down at his book, curled up on the floor, with his cauldron next to him, attempting to make his own fireworks for New Year's Eve. I was just thinking about the sheets. Pfft, Sirius snorted dismissively. They won't even notice. Ought to fix the crystal ball we broke, too. Nah, and probably ought to look for those chess pieces that went, missing. Sirius rolled his eyes. They'd already summoned most of the pieces back from the bushes. Look, everyone knew it was just going to be the two of us here over Christmas. It was their responsibility to lock up anything they didn't want to shoot out of the window. And Peter's bed? It stopped making that weird noise now. Yeah, but it still giggles when you sit on it. He'll work out how to fix it, or get Desdemona to help him. You worry too much. Bang! The cauldron in front of him rudely exploded, sending Sirius flying backwards as dusty green smoke filled the room. Sirius blinked in shock as Remus ran from the window, coughing. Well, at least he'd gotten the colour right. I told you we should just ask Flitwick. The dust drifted down, coating the entire room in a bright green silt. Remus gave him a pointed look, raising an eyebrow at the mess. Sirius grinned cheekily. Leave it to the house elves? I'm having a shower. By the time he'd washed all the soot out of his hair, Sirius found that Remus had fallen asleep. Curled up on top of his blankets, with nothing better to do, he decided he might as well pay a visit to Flitwick, which went surprisingly well. He'd half expected the professor to sternly turn him away, possibly throwing in a lecture about how irresponsible it would be to set off magical fireworks from his bedroom window. But instead, the small teacher was incredibly helpful, apparently delighted that Sirius thought to ask him for help. He made me promise not to tell McGonagall that he taught me, though, Sirius explained to Remus later that night. He's really gone up in my estimation, old flitters. Can't believe you went without me. I'm best at charms, Remus grumbled, clambering out of the window to sit next to Sirius on the ledge. You were sleeping. Still, he pouted, folding his arms and hunching his shoulders. Sirius just shook his head fondly, chuckling, and double-checked to make sure his newly made fireworks were ready to go. There were only a few minutes left till midnight. Everything was ready. He kicked his heels against the stone wall of Gryffindor Tower, legs dangling out into the dark. Tomorrow things would go back to normal. James and Peter and all the girls would return, and classes would resume, and the halls would be filled with chattering students. It would be wonderful, marvellous, fantastic. But for now, they were alone. For now, Remus was breathing quietly next to him, breath steaming in the frigid winter air. For now, Sirius was allowed to reach out a hand, to squeeze his knee, to smile gently, and try to ignore the way Mooney's answering smile made his heart ache in his chest. Ready? He lifted his wand. Remus nodded, eyes bright. Ready.